Welcome back to the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast. I'm Thomas Miller along with Robert Glasscock. We are glad you're here, and we are going to talk about something that I hear a lot. Robert, you probably hear it a lot from readings and the clients that you talk to. People will say one of two things. This is what I hear. They'll say, I've gotten into astrology, but it doesn't match my life at all. Or on a microcosm of that, they might say, I don't have a blank. I don't have a Mars. I don't have a Venus. I would say, for me, I don't have a moon. So when it doesn't seem that astrology paints the vivid picture of our life, or if a particular planet doesn't show up, like, okay, I'll use my moon as an example. You've got the moon in Libra. I'm the most unbalanced human being that ever walked on the planet. So, it's like things like that when it seems there's a contradiction. Can you walk us through that?
Oh, yeah. What a great question. Yes, I'll try. I always wonder about that. There are such things as unaspected planets in astrology because we have these orbs. And of course, the tighter the orb, the better. But for example, for a conjunction, generally the orb is 8 degrees, let's say. For something like an inconjunct, maybe the orb is only 3 degrees. And in fact, I use a larger orb for inconjuncts than that. But there are such things as unaspected planets. And it's an interesting condition because whatever that archetype is of that planet, if it really does not have any aspects to anything else in the chart, then it will be a difficult planet to integrate into the life because it doesn't have any connections to anything else, except in a general sense. It may be in the same house with another planet, but it could be 20 degrees apart from that planet, so it doesn't really qualify as a conjunction. And one of the ways to study a planet like that, or to study a planet that you feel like with you, the moon in Libra, doesn't really apply to you, I would beg to differ. And here's why. If you go to Reinhold Ebertein's Cosmobiology, and you can do this in a computer program. You can print out the midpoint tree, or the midpoints rather, in what we call a 90-degree sort. And what that does is to list all of the planets and midpoints in the order from 0 degrees through 30. And so all of the hard aspects will show up in a 90-degree sort so that you can look, for example, your moon in Libra is at the midpoint of Mercury and Venus. It's also hard aspecting the midpoint of your Saturn and Uranus. It also hard aspects, I think by square, the midpoint of your Uranus and your ascendant, and it aspects the midpoint of your Uranus and your north node. Well, Uranus is the planet of divorce, Thomas, among other things. So suddenly, with just looking at your moon and your midpoint tree, you can see instantly this man has a lot of lessons to learn in marriage and about divorce, because there is both the desire to be married and to be in a marriage and to have children. At the same time, it coexists with a desire to be separate.
So really the purpose of this episode is to say, ladies, run now!
Well, from you. Only from you.
Yeah.
The rest of us have a different midpoint tree. And for example, my invitation might be run this way. Come right over here. Which can also get you into trouble. So I just wanted to share this moment of personal confession with you. But so by looking at these, and this to me, this is one of the reasons I love cosmobiology, as I mentioned in another one of our podcasts, because everybody's moon in Libra is completely different from everybody else's. And it's because of these midpoint relationships. And in midpoints in cosmobiology, you're allowing 1.5 degree orb. It's very specific. But you can look at this, for example, you have your moon at the midpoint of your Mercury and Venus. And if you read cosmobiology, this is a direct quote. Reinhold Libertine writes out, they're like formulas. The moon at the midpoint of Mercury and Venus, a person susceptible to beauty, a love contact. Okay, so far, so good. Then you see that, well, your moon is at the midpoint of Saturn and Uranus. And Reinhold Libertine says, strong emotional tensions and strains, depressions, inconstancy, the desire to liberate oneself suddenly from emotional stress, separations from women, very specific. You have your moon at the midpoint of your Uranus and your ascendant. This formula he translates as a highly emotional disposition, the tendency to get excited easily through the influence of others, a quick change of mood caused by others, a quick change of mood and sudden experiences with members of the opposite sex. Another one, the moon at the midpoint of your Uranus node, sudden associations with people, sudden associations with other people, which are terminated quickly. The sun equals the moon Uranus, which you happen to have. Easily aroused by emotion, ambitious aspirations, self-willedness, and so on. So you can look at a moon like this, and even though in Libra, obviously, this man wants to be married. Well, yeah, he does, but he's also got Saturn in his 7th house, which happens to be accidentally dignified, by the way, in that house, because Saturn is exalted in Libra. So it's accidentally dignified if Saturn falls in the 7th house, no matter what sign it's in. So if you look at these midpoints, suddenly you would then begin to get associations and readings that you would simply never see otherwise. And then suddenly your moon makes total sense to you as a client hearing this or as an astrologer reading it.
Do you have those cosmobiology interpretations memorized, or is that something you would reference in preparation for a reading?
Well, that's the thing. You can't really memorize them. I still have the book, the original one that I bought, which I had to, it fell apart. So remember those 3-ring binder reinforcers, the little, paste on stickers that you could put around the holes for 3-ring binders?
Sure, yeah.
All right, well, so that's how old this thing is. And I have it in a kind of 3-ring permanent binder. But you can't memorize them all. But what happens is the longer you use them and the longer you practice with, you begin to understand them. So you don't need the books anymore. And this is what I try and encourage students to do over time, is to just glean as much information, absorb as much as you can. But you get to a point where you understand what the moon means and each planet, and you can begin to look at these aspects on your own, or even look at the midpoints on your own and read them for yourself at some point. So it's not a matter of memorizing it so much. And many astrologers, including me, when I first started out with cosmobiology, I had the book right there, so I could look it up. I didn't do that in personal readings because you don't want to be looking at reference materials. You want to look like you know what you're doing. But you do. You get to a point where you understand these planets and what they mean. And if you have any questions, you can open the book.
Now, we have the imprint, and I do have a moon. But what you described is kind of like not how you'd like to show up in the world, and yet my history is exactly right down the line of what you just discussed, as shown in the Subconscious Mind Mastery podcast. And if it wasn't for that moon and my lack of knowledge of it, I wouldn't have the work that I do now, because it was all based on those stories. But let's factor personal growth into this, and let's talk about consciousness, and let's talk about, can you grow past those things so that you could have a successful relationship?
Yes, you can. Or in my case, I have Saturn in the 7th house as well. And in fact, the first book I got, the old A to Z Delineate, I set up my horoscope and I'm looking at this and thought, this is horrible. And it was. I mean, the reading in the old books, I have Saturn, I have Capricorn rising, Saturn exactly opposite my ascendant, and Saturn is exactly square my sun moon opposition. So there's a grand cross involving my 7th house, my first, and so on. It's a horrible chart for marriage. And yet I also have Venus trine that Saturn in my seventh and sextile my ascendant. And I have Jupiter sextile at Saturn and trine my, so there's some good aspects to it. But I have to tell you, marriage and relationships in my life have absolutely been a very Saturnian. I've learned more from them than probably anything else. And the thing that I ultimately learned about myself, and it took me probably till I was 50, even with astrology, is that I really don't want a marriage. I thought I did. I really did. And I did. I really wanted marriage and I really wanted children. Well, I was lucky enough to live with another man's 3 children for a while. And I was a good father for that period, but I also knew, I think intuitively, it was not going to last. It was only temporary. But the truth about me is I really love my work beyond anything else. And my work has always been creative. I have Venus ruling Taurus on my 5th house, and Venus is in my 10th of career. So I've primarily had 2 careers. One as an astrologer and one as a television writer. Simultaneously there for a while. And both of those are very time-consuming careers. With TV writing, for example, I've slept over at the studio just to make sure the script was ready. You have 300 people depending on the script, so you have something horrible befall. It happens, and I'm sorry your mother died. Where's the script? There are no excuses in that business. And I like that. I like that kind of professionalism. But so that's really, with a chart like mine, it took me this long to understand it, but I would only attract relationships that would either leave me or I would behave in such a way, maybe unconsciously, to push them away, or vice versa. I would only get involved with a relationship that I would want to leave ultimately, because what I really love to do most is work on these creative. I love astrology and I love writing. And that's the truth about me. So I'm no longer, believe me, the last thing I want in my life is a 24/7 relationship. It's inconceivable to me, but that didn't used to be the case. So I did suffer through love and marriage with Saturn in the 7th, just as you have. And believe me, it's heartbreaking. I have Venus in Scorpio, and you are a Scorpio, so I know what it is to have your heart broken.
Yeah.
And that's a good lesson to learn too. So it's not a matter of can you overcome it. You do. I think if you grow up, you understand why, what your chart is telling you and why. And today I have no interest in it because it is less important to me to have a relationship than it is to have the relationship I have with astrology, which is really time consuming. And when you're trying to live with somebody in a marriage and you have strangers coming into the house all hours of the day and night to go into a private room with you to have a quote unquote reading, well, your wife has to wonder, is that what they're really doing in there?
You can put a camera up now.
You could.
Now, see, I would echo what you're saying, and I have Saturn in the same placement. So Robert and I, that's why we vibe so well, and it's why we get in recording sessions at 3:30 in the morning. I mean, it's that very thing. But the other piece that I have is a desire for that partnership. I would like a partner in this work. And I know that's a clear thing right there. Is almost spilled the beans on the problem is, I would like a partner in this work because the presumption is the work, But I also, because of the growth that I've done, is I realize that there is a soul lesson there that can only happen in relationship.
Well, you have a much better chart for having that than I do. Now, look, ironically, what you and I have is a partnership in these podcasts.
Exactly. And other
it's
things
not
that
a
we've
marriage,
talked, yeah.
But it is a business marriage, and they're ruled by the same house, the 7th house. So, but you have a much better chart because, for example, Saturn in Capricorn sextiles your Scorpio planets. You see, and also it even sextiles your moon. Your moon's in Libra, but it's at 25, and it only has 7 degrees to go before it's exactly sextile your Saturn in the seventh. So your Sun, Neptune, Mars, and Moon all sextile at Saturn. So ultimately, you could have one. You could absolutely have one. And of course, you have a loaded fifth house, which is children, which I don't have, but you do.
Yeah, right.
So,
well, we'll see. We'll see what's out there. All right, so we've talked about planets. Now let's talk about the macro for a minute. So I've heard people say, in fact, I know somebody who says that their chart just doesn't match their life at all. For example, this person is an Aries, Sun in Aries, and is very passive, like doesn't like conflict. So what happens when you say, well, I have the Sun in Aries, and I know we're just talking very, very generally here, not looking at the aspects or anything else. But when you say that, and the chart, the cookbook screams that you should have a certain personality type and you don't, where do you look then?
First of all, I have run across this too throughout my career periodically. It's very rare when somebody, my chart just doesn't match me. Take the example of the Aries woman, whom you said is, what did you say just now? What was the term you used? She was passive?
Just passive, just non-conflicting.
And the minute I heard that, I thought, well, if she is saying that my chart doesn't fit me at all, I'll guarantee you she is passive-aggressive. And that is an Aries trait. She's consciously blocking the Martian energy, which is aggressive. But it comes out anyway. It'll come out passive. And nobody will admit or likes to admit that they're passive aggressive. But I'll guarantee you. So in my experience, Thomas, these few people I've ever run, my chart doesn't match me at all. When I start discussing the chart with them, it turns out it does. I've never seen it otherwise. But it's often the person doesn't want to admit something about themselves. And in her case, and we've all met, I think, seemingly passive Aries people. And depending, of course, maybe they have Mars in Libra, for example. That's not, that's a detriment for Mars to be in Libra, as I have it, for example. Because it's opposite one of the signs that Mars rules. It's opposite Aries. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, but it's in its fall in Cancer, for example. But it's in its detriment in Libra. Well, if you're in Aries with Mars in Libra, you will probably seem, and depending again on where the moon is, because the moon rules who we are on a day-to-day basis. Hate to tell everybody. I don't care what your sun sign is. What you are and the way you behave on a day-to-day basis is your moon sign and aspects to it. So there's that aspect of astrology, and people say, well, this doesn't fit me. Well, in fact, it does. And you have to be very careful when you're doing readings. I once got into a reading with a woman very much like this, and I'm thinking about an Aries woman. And I finally said, this configuration I've seen a lot in either borderline personality disorder or even bipolarity. And she blew up at me, just exploded. And when she calmed down, and we continued with the reading, and after about 10 minutes, she apologized. And she said, I didn't mean to blow up at you, but, that's exactly what my boyfriend has said about me, is that I'm borderline. Well, she is borderline personality, but she didn't want to admit it. She's never been treated for it, and so on. So there you have an example of people who are denying their own truth. And it's the same thing, I think, with people. This chart doesn't fit me. Maybe they've read some things in a book, or maybe they got with an astrologer who doesn't know so much, and it didn't seem to fit them. But in fact, if you look at the whole chart, I can do it, and you can do it. You can sit there and see aspects and say, no, you're still in Aries. And look at why, and you're blocking and you can point out exactly the kinds of results that configuration is giving her in her life. But I've never seen it fail with people that say, it doesn't fit me. Well, yes, it does. It's just that you're not very conscious about it. Let me show you some of the results of this in your life, and you'll start asking questions. I can't believe you can see that. Well, yeah, you can. It's there. So that's been my experience of that phenomenon about people who say their chart of this planet or something does not fit them. It's that they haven't explored it deeply enough.
So that's a good point for the folks that are listening who want to do readings or are doing readings. that if you get a non-response there, you say, well, your sun in Aries, tell me about that. Well, I'm passive. I never want conflict. I don't like to get into arguments. I duck. I take the low road. Then what you're saying is start looking for the aspects of where that could be hidden, where that is masked.
Yes.
So just start take that for what it is. Okay. Because they're probably telling you exactly what it is for them. Then you start looking for the conflict of that.
And, in another podcast, we were talking about the decanates and the Dwads. And there again, you have the sun in Aries, let's say. Maybe it's in the Capricorn Dwad of Aries. There again, suddenly you've got a Saturn sub-rulership of that Aries sun, which means a whole different thing than if you have Aries in, say, the Leo Dwad or the Leo decanate of Aries. It's another fire sign, so it's much more likely to express the way a typical Aries is. But with Saturn being in there, suddenly it's a whole different expression. So those are the kinds of details that I think are always important to consider. If you're aware of them, they're there. Okay,
perfect. All right, let's talk about one other thing, and we could use this as a springboard as well. So I've got this cluster. I call it my famous Marson tune. Mars, Sun, Neptune, all at 666 of Scorpio. Same degree. So that's two things that could come up. First of all, the moon is 11 degrees removed from that. So we talk about the concept of under the beams. The ancients described this where the sun is so bright that it can basically wash out planets nearby. But then also, because I have that tight cluster on the same degree, the Cazimi comes into play as well.
I do pay attention to Cazimi. And Cazimi is a planet that is within a pretty exact conjunction with the sun, within minutes. Most astrologers say within 17 minutes of 1 degree, close to the sun. That's Cazimi. It's that close. And it makes that planet very strong and very powerful. At least that's the theory. And I find that that's true. In fact, I think in the old days, when a planet was within 17 degrees of the sun, it was not only called Cazimi, but it was said to be in the sun's heart.
Well, you've got one right here. So
love that quote.
In my deal, the sun is at 54 minutes, and then Neptune is at 42. So there's the Cazimi. And
because both of the sun and Neptune in your chart are both at 6 degrees.
Yeah, and then Mars also at 6 degrees is 35 minutes. Yes. So it's not Cazimi, but I can tell you, anybody who knows me knows that Mars is very, very alive.
Well, it may not technically be within 17 minutes of the sun, but by translation of light, it does count as Cazimi. By translation of light, I mean this. Your sun and Neptune are absolutely Cazimi. They're only 7 minutes apart in Scorpio, 7 minutes of 1 degree. So the Neptune and the sun are absolutely in Cazimi. Well, Mars is also conjunct your Neptune. And therefore, Neptune translates the light of its conjunction with Mars to your sun. That's what's called translation of light. So even though technically your Mars is not 17 degrees with a conjunction with your sun, it still counts as Cazimi because of its conjunction with Neptune, which is in Cazimi. So really all three of those planets do count as Cazimi. And it gives them a great more emphasis. I don't know if power is the right word, but it does absolutely give them emphasis. The rest of it, the under the beams, in the old days, a planet that was approaching a conjunction with your sun was considered to be decreasing in light. So a planet on the 12th house side of your sun, if you put your sun on the ascendant to see which side that planet is, a planet approaching your sun at birth from the 12th house side is decreasing in light. And this means under the beams, as they used to say. If it's moving out of a conjunction, moving away from the sun, but still close to it, it's said to be increasing in light. And this under the beams is about 17 degrees, is traditionally what I frankly don't make any distinction. It's a conjunction. My Neptune is 4 degrees away from it's applying to my sun at birth. Or actually, my sun is technically separating from Neptune. but Neptune's at 4 and my sun is at 8. So they're 4 degrees away. I think of them as a conjunction. The old days, they used to consider this a pretty dire position, that the planet is significantly weakened if it's in under the beams. You really have to struggle with that planet to learn to express what it signifies in a chart. Well, what does that mean? That's all so vague. You can define, what do you mean struggle? I struggle with everything, we all do. So
Right.
I really don't, I don't pay much attention to under the beams. Combust is when a planet gets to be within about 8 degrees of the sun. Well, my Neptune fits that situation. And in your case, it's Neptune and Mars, or both. And that's said to be combust. And the theory is that, really, in the old days, this was considered very bad. Again, in the old days, a lot of this stuff sounds very fatalistic. Combustion, the theory is that the sun burns up the meaning of the planet. Well, that too, to me, you can think about that and see if it applies in your life. I never found any additional information from considering combustion that I didn't get elsewhere. So the only one of those three, of combustion and under the beams and Cazimi, the only one that I really do use is Cazimi, and that I do pay attention to. But to me, it's just a very strong emphasis on the planet, which gives it more power than it would normally show up in the chart.
Well, and what you've opened up for us here is that whole conversation about the midpoints, because I thought the moon at 11 degrees away, not combust, but certainly under the beams, was washed out. But what you've vividly pointed out is dig deeper.
Well, yes. And I use Occam's razor all the time. Keep it simple, stupid, the simplest, and so on. I had a client yesterday. She was really curious about her Chiron. And she said, you don't have Chiron in my chart. And I said, no, I don't use it. And she said, well, why not? And I told her, when Chiron first became popular back in, I don't know, when was it, the mid 70s or the 70s somewhere? Of course I used it and tried it, because I'll try everything to see if it works. And I found, the wounded healer and so on. And I told her yesterday, I said, I have never gotten anything from Chiron that I didn't get elsewhere. And she was saying, well, it's in my so-and-so and so-and-so, and it means the wounded healer. And I said, yes, we just talked about that in your chart from Jupiter and Pisces on your 7th cusp, didn't we? The exact same thing. So I've never gotten a thing from Chiron that I don't get elsewhere. So why use it? To me, it's just another factor that complicates things unnecessarily for me. And I'm not saying it's wrong or that it's meaningless. It isn't. But for me, I have simply never found anything using Chiron that I didn't already get. So I don't use it.
Well, I guess if somebody also has a planet that they don't think is as alive, could you not also throw the Decanates and the Dwads into the interpretation to
Absolutely.
dig deeper? Okay.
There you go, Thomas. That's the big one. Every planet has 3 decanates. You divide each sign by 10 degrees. So you've got 3 decanates with different sub-rulers, and then you've got 2.5 divisions from Arabic astrology, which are the Dwads. And that absolutely gives you a 3rd sub-rulership of that particular degree. So absolutely right. Those decanates and Dwads help tremendously. I think I told you, had another astrologer and his wife out in LA challenged me when I said, can you tell me which one of these twins were born just minutes apart? One of them has, I don't know, asthma or something, some lung thing. That's all I remember. And the other one doesn't. Can you tell which one? I said, yeah, this one. And they looked at each other, and then they looked at me and said, well, that's right. How could you tell? And I said, because the aspect is closer in this one, more exact. Same aspect, but just closer. And then you can use the Dwads. And generally, the Dwads and decanates will give you the information that is really vital in those kinds of situations. So I always pay attention to decanates and Dwads.
So let's just throw this moon example down. I'm looking at the decanate for that Venus in Virgo.
Well, no, the decanate of Venus is in the 3rd decanate of Virgo, right?
Yes.
So what sign would that be? Be Taurus. So it adds a Taurus. Yeah, it's ruled by Venus, but it adds a Taurus element to the Virgo that you wouldn't otherwise pick up if you didn't consider the decanate. And then you get into the Dwad, and it also happens to be the Taurus Dwad. So it's a double emphasis on Taurus that's connected with this Venus and Virgo that you have. Venus in Virgo, first of all, is not an easy placement for Venus in marriage, you realize.
Exactly.
It's an interesting sign. It's the sign of the Virgin.
Right.
For starters, but that it's so misleading. People don't understand Virgo at all. Virgo is actually, it's an earth sign. It can be very lusty, but it is a sign that doesn't like to belong to anybody, interestingly enough. So it's not the easiest planet in a marriage, and mainly because Venus in Virgo, like me, loves its work. If it finds its work, if it finds its vocation and finds its calling, like you, it loves its work, and it loves its work probably beyond relationships, to tell you the truth. But it can't say that. Nobody can say that because it sounds so antisocial. But that's the issue. So a person's work life with Venus and Virgo can often interfere with their marriage and love life. For example, Venus and Virgo is terrific for a career in health fields. Well, if you're a doctor and you're working emergency, you're going to be living at the hospital for the whole weekend, because you got an emergency staff of doctors who sleep at the hospital because they have to be there. Well, some marriages can do just fine with that arrangement. Some can't. So it's that sort of thing. Venus and Virgo is a tricky sign for love and marriage, just to start with.
Well, this is great. I mean, this is so interesting on how to take something that looks face value. Well, look, first of all, interpreting the natal chart is a chore in and of itself, right? But now what you're doing is you're drilling down on so much more and bringing all these other seasonings in. So you just see, and we haven't even talked, oh my gosh, now you're going to shoot me. Harmonics.
No, I'm not going to shoot you.
It's like, there are so many layers because now you can slice and dice that circle 360 ways. You can take every degree of it and break it down. So it really is an amazing study that we're talking about.
Well, when you mentioned harmonics, Thomas, that is why the degrees of the planets at birth represent ages. I've never read that anywhere. People keep saying, did you discover that? I don't know if I discovered it. It's just I became aware of it. To me, it seemed obvious. And yet every time I teach it or even writing the book, this is a revelation. Well, I don't know. To me, it's staring me in the face. It just seems obvious. But that's why the harmonics work. And you can take it to, for example, I have Saturn on my seventh cusp at 10 degrees, 20 minutes, I think, 10 degrees, 20 Cancer. Well, every 10 and 1/3 year, Saturn is active in my life. Every 10 and 1/3 years. So 20 or 21, it would be active. Lo and behold, that was the first major marriage-like relationship that I ever had. And so that's why harmonics work. Those degrees at birth can be multiplied by 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you like. Harmonics again. And if you have a planet like I do at, say, Mercury is at 24 degrees, you can divide that by 2 and get age 12, when my Mercury archetype will also be predominant, which it was.
Well, back to the books. We've got more work to do.
It never ceases.
It never ceases. Thank you so much, Robert. This has been fascinating. We really appreciate it. Thanks for expanding this for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And we will see you next time on the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with the GOAT, Robert Glasscock. Thanks for listening.